Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joni Spain, and I'm a career advisor in the Office of Entrepreneurship and Career Development at the Jacobs School of Music. We're delighted to partner with the IU Alumni Association to take a virtual trip around the world or around the country and visit with our friends and alumni. Today, we're in our nation's cultural capital, Washington, D.C. I'm pleased to introduce Kristen Gallagher, president of the DC chapter of the IU Alumni Association. Hi, Kristen.
Oh, you're on
Take
mute.
it away.
Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much to Joni and the Jacobs School for giving us an opportunity to highlight the capital of the country. DC is, I've just actually gotten back to DC from extended period in the Midwest, and even with the all the changes, it's still a wonderful place to be and to be able to explore. I've been out on social distancing walks, bike rides, and I'm really rediscovering DC. I've lived here for 10 years. I'm a School of Global International Studies major, and I've lived here for 10 years, came out for law school, and have just really gotten to see the city in a new way that I wouldn't have taken the time to pre-COVID. So it's been a really interesting time and an exciting opportunity. So I think that's kind of probably what I'm sure everyone else is going to talk about as well, is that it's a, shall we say, interesting time, but that there are opportunities as a result of that. With the Alumni Association, we are, pivoting hard to virtual events, which are more challenging in some respects. DC is very much a connection, networking oriented city, and so that is a challenge, but it also is an opportunity because we get to do things like this, where you can be in Bloomington and talk to alumni from across the country, from DC, and get their perspectives. And that's really valuable and something that people might not have taken the time to do pre-COVID. So we're going to be having a couple events coming up that will be posted to watch the alumni page if you Google that, and it takes you like the alumni homepage. Specifically, we're going to do a welcome to DC event on October 15th, and it's going to be some introduction to the board, talking about some of the events that we normally do and ways to engage with us. But we're also going to try and do some mini networking where we put people into kind of small groups, Zoom breakout rooms, and give you a chance to talk to people. So if that's something you're interested in, keep an eye out for it. That'll be going up. If it's not up today, it'll be up very soon. But that's a great way with any city that you go to, check out those pages. As Joni is highlighting in the chat, we do have a great Facebook page. I think one really great thing about DC is that there are people that are from here, and as I've lived here longer, I've met more of them, but so many people come to the DC area from other places, and so they all can really relate to the experience of being in Bloomington or being somewhere else and coming to DC and having to figure out how to make friends, make connections, build a network, find housing, all of that. And so I think that's one thing that you can really see on both Facebook page and our LinkedIn page, is that people will post about housing, people will post questions saying, hey, I'm new to the area, I'm looking to do this type of work, or I'm trying to find a new running buddy or something, and people will really respond to that. We have a great group of alumni here that are very interested in making connections, because you never know when your best friend is going to move to another country because they're with the State Department and they got stationed somewhere else, or when your new best friend could move to the city. So it's a really, I think, different from some other cities, really welcoming environment. And I would strongly encourage you all to stalk people on LinkedIn a little bit. It's totally okay to do. It's how I work with the Department of Justice in the Office of National Affairs. And the day that I got my interview, I should really have done this sooner, but I got the list of people and was looking them up on LinkedIn and thought, oh crap, I really should have looked for somebody from Bloomington to see if there's anybody there. So that day I found a guy who had both a Indiana undergrad and a GW law degree, and just like I did, and I messaged him out of the blue on LinkedIn and said, I did not mention that my interview was that day, but he responded and said, I'd be happy to talk to you, and gave me some really good tips and advice about the office. that I think made a big difference in me getting the job. So it was a little crazy, and I would definitely recommend doing your research in advance, but it's definitely a welcoming environment, and the culture from coming out of IU is very strong and gives you a lot of opportunities to make connections, crash on people's couches. There's one of our main professional development focused board members, Jordan Wicker, is very active on the LinkedIn page, and he definitely is somebody who came out, crashed on couches, did internships, kind of worked his way into a lobbying position, and did it a lot by having breakfast with people. And he values that and is going to be trying to do some virtual breakfasts coming up, and again, giving people that opportunity. So there's really a lot to offer in the city and a lot of opportunity, but obviously the pandemic does make it a little different. And I think some of the other people in this group will be able to give you some real helpful information about how to approach that, or how they've been approaching it, what the challenges are. But I think if you think broadly about your skills and do the legwork, alums love talking to students, gives us a very big, warm, alumni nostalgia vibe. And so take advantage of that, both while you're in school, while you're out of school. You get bonus points, and it's much easier to do when you're a student. Gets harder, a little bit harder the older you are. So definitely take advantage of that. And yeah, I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Kristen's going to be able to stay on the call for about 15 more minutes. So if you have questions for her, please feel free to put them in the chat and she can respond to you directly.
I would also say, if you think of a question later, sorry. So on our page, you can also email the chapter at washdc@alumni.iu.edu. And that's a great way if you have specific interests or are looking to connect. We're happy to do what we can with our network to kind of push to make connections for people. So that's something that you can look into if your question comes after I leave.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kristen. We know that it takes time to build a private teaching studio. You need flexibility for auditions. It takes time to develop your gig performance career in a new city. And so we've invited Brianna Rakowska from Beacon Hill to join us today to talk a little bit about job search strategies and some things that you might think about in that interim as you're building a performance career. Hi, Brianna, welcome.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I'm just going to be sharing my screen here. We're going to be talking a little bit about, again, job searching during COVID, and potentially what you could do to use staffing as a resource for you, during your job search while you're here in DC. I am not an IU alum, unfortunately, but I went to school about 3 hours south of DC. I'm actually from Pacific Grove, California, so I am definitely very familiar with getting to know a new city without any connections. But I currently work with Beacon Hill in our DC office, and I specialize in administrative placements. And so that's where, that can be anything from like data entry to reception to high-level executive support. And I work on the temporary and the temp to hire side of things. So what is staffing, essentially, I think is a good place to be starting. Essentially, what staffing firms do is we work to connect job seekers, students, people who have a little bit of experience already, people who are looking for jobs with employers that are looking to fill those positions. We work really heavily on the temporary contract side of things and the temporary to hire side, which means that those temporary roles turn into permanent positions. One of the things that I really like to emphasize on temporary work is, it provides a lot of flexibility and it provides a lot of opportunities to be networking here in DC. To touch on what Kristen said earlier, DC is a huge networking city. I have had tons of candidates who have taken contract roles in different organizations, things that they, didn't really think that they were interested in, and they've ended up either falling in love with it or making a really great connection that's led to something else later. So, I think just kind of being open in your job search can be a really good way to put some feelers out in the DC area. So, is now a good time to look for a new job? What I will always say, there's no bad time to look for a new position, even during COVID, but I'm not gonna lie to you, it has been, this is not, it's difficult for everyone, I think, in terms of job searching. The job market, we saw a really big slowdown from March to the middle of July. We've actually started to see a little bit of an uptick, which is really exciting, but it's definitely something that the market is changing. We're seeing a lot of things that are different, and we're definitely not, back to a full robust job market like we normally are. But, if a company is willing to interview and onboard and bring someone on in the current market, odds are they are, a well-established company, they're stable, and they're looking forward to, 2021, 2022, and they're anticipating, they have their budgets laid out, they are anticipating being kind of stable for that time. So those are companies, I think, that are a really great place to be starting in your job search. And then also, if it's a job that you've been looking at, if it's something you're interested in, why not apply? Worst case scenario, you start a relationship with the HR team, you can start that conversation, and then you have an established relationship for when those positions do open up. And we've actually seen, the market in terms of candidates has changed a little bit as well. A lot of people who are currently working have actually stopped their job search because they're not looking to make a change in the middle of a pandemic. So the candidate pool can actually be a little bit less competitive because there are less people with like full-time jobs that are looking to transition. So that's been something that's really interesting to see as well. But, looking at jobs, I think something that is important, during this time is just flexibility in terms of what you're looking at. As the job market has started to open up, obviously certain industries have opened up a little bit more quickly. There are other industries that I think we're going to see that are not going to open up as quickly. Hospitality, performing arts are things that I have not seen that have been hiring as heavily, but things like, commercial real estate and stuff like that, as clients are going back into the office, they need people there like working. So, companies that you might not have considered before, that might not have been on, top 10 companies that you would be excited to work for. But, if they're really great organizations that treat their employees well, it's a great way to kind of start building your experience, even if it is something that isn't necessarily the dream job. And especially if you're moving to DC, DC is an expensive city. I have a lot of candidates that are looking at doing things, in a temporary capacity in the interim that are not necessarily what they want to be doing long-term, but just because they want to be working and kind of keep themselves afloat while they're job searching. I think also with contract work, the one thing to note, it does provide a lot of flexibility. You can be interviewing, you can be job searching, you can be auditioning, and it gives you that flexibility to be able to kind of build your schedule how you need it to make it work for you, so you can still be working as well. So, having that flexibility to look at things that are outside of that original like first search that you were doing, I think is something that can be really, really valuable. On that note, if you're looking at things that are outside of the performing arts space or, whatever you're targeting, you're going to want to change the language on your resume to be more tailored towards those positions. So, for example, I work with a lot of actors and creatives here in DC, and I will often recommend that they have two resumes, one for positions that are going to be more, either acting focused or music focused, and then ones that are going to be more administrative. So, I think the first place to start is look at the job descriptions of the positions that you're applying to. Go literally bullet by bullet, look at the responsibilities, look at what they're looking for, and see if there's anything that you've done that you can be highlighting or emphasizing. Or, I have a lot of people that'll leave front desk positions or customer service positions off for a more creatively focused resume. But, for something more administrative with our clients, that's something that we really want to emphasize. So I think having two different resumes so you can be tailoring it towards those different jobs and those different clients that you're applying to, is the best way to strategize. You want to make sure that you are kind of showing clients what they're looking for. And then also looking at requirements, looking at specific softwares, like even, using Excel. We work on a lot of data entry projects. Most people have had exposure to it. Not everyone puts it on their resume. If someone's looking for someone to do something like that, make sure it's on there so people see that you know how to use it, or if you've used any other databases, or if you've used Photoshop or Canva, maybe to design a flyer or something like that. All of those things, while, they might not be the main focus of your resume, having that experience is super valuable and can, help you land that first temp job, with Beacon Hill. So, I recommend typically having 2 resumes, one that has related experience and one that has other experience. That related experience should be towards the job that you want to be focused on. But I think having, if you're, looking at something that's like, if you have an entirely separate career, like acting or music or whatever it may be, having the other experience down there, like at the bottom as well, so it paints a more cohesive picture of who you are, I do think is valuable. But again, you want that experience at the top that you want to be emphasizing for those jobs that you're applying for. To note on that, looking at LinkedIn, I recommend having 2 resumes. I do not recommend having 2 LinkedIn profiles. You are just one person, so you want to make sure that the LinkedIn matches both of your resumes. You want to make sure that you are highlighting both skill sets there on your LinkedIn, so people aren't looking and seeing that you have 2 different profiles, because it can be a little bit confusing for recruiters. You want to create a headline there that highlights the type of work that you're going to be looking for. So if you're targeting, both roles that are more creatively focused or roles that are more administrative or whatever it may be, maybe say that you're open to both. Or if you want to put one on hold for the time being and focus on one of the others, make sure that you're adjusting that. So it's clear, what the ultimate goal is for you. Also, make sure that those skill sets are emphasized. Make sure the software skill sets are emphasized as well. So if recruiters are looking, they'll be able to immediately pull that from your resume. Make sure that you have a professional looking picture. It functions like a headshot. You want to make sure that people can see you in that professional environment. I definitely recommend, you can do it literally with an iPhone. Don't have yourself like out at a party or at a wedding or anything like that, or something that's super cropped, something that's crisp and clear and professional. So, before you even talk to that person, you're putting out that, professional and projection that you want to be putting off. The other thing that I think is really, really helpful when you are job searching on LinkedIn is there is a section that you can change on your profile that says open to new opportunities. When recruiters are looking for candidates on LinkedIn, there is a way for us to filter down on candidates that are actively looking or actively open to new opportunities. And that is the first place that recruiters will look. And so if you add that you're open to new opportunities, it kind of indicates that you are on the job search, and it makes it a lot more likely for people to be reaching out to you because they know that you're open to a conversation, whether it's the dream job, whether it's something that's totally unrelated. But odds are, if a recruiter reaches out to you and they want to talk to you about something, they have something that will match part of your skill set. So it's a great way to help your LinkedIn kind of work for you. Once you get an interview, once you connect with either a recruiter or an employer, I think, just some important interview do's and don'ts. And this goes for COVID and non-COVID times. Make sure when you're going into an interview, make sure you research the company, make sure you take a look at the job description, be ready to talk about how your experience and the stuff that you've done relates to that job description. Definitely do not walk in unprepared. They're going to have a lot of questions for you. Don't sit there and read straight off your resume. Be prepared to talk about your experience and elaborate on it. Dress your best. Whether it's, a really buttoned up organization, something that you'd think, definitely going to be a full suit, or even if the organization is a little bit more casual, I always recommend, if not a full suit, wearing some kind of a blazer. I think that putting your best foot forward, first impressions do end up meaning a lot. And so I think, even if you get, just a standard black blazer, so you're, starting off on a professional foot, make sure that you bring questions. They will probably answer a lot of the questions that you originally have. So you don't want to get to the end of an interview and seem like it's not something you're super interested in. So as you're doing research, think of things that you can be doing that dig a little bit deeper, that shows that it is something that you're interested in. Be prepared to answer situational questions. Recruiters will often ask you, what's a time that you have had to answer a really hard question, or give me an example of a time that you failed. And, you know, having answers to those ready to go are going to make your interviewing experience a lot easier. It's going to make your nerves a lot calmer, to feel like you're prepared. And then, you know, just be ready for the strengths and weaknesses question. It does sound cliche, but people do ask it all the time. I'd say another important you know, make sure that you're focusing on the positives. You know, if you're talking about past employers, focus on the positive side of things. You know, if they're asking for like why you're looking for something different, focus on like what you're excited about rather than, you know, for example, like bad mouthing a previous employer. But I think, again, focusing on the positive side of things is really, you want to leave that like positive and professional note kind of, so that's what they're left with. Practice. You know, I think it's very helpful to be, you know, chat with your friends, chat with them about your background or your experience, or, you know, if you're working with Beacon Hill, if you're working with a recruiter, you can talk through practice interview questions with them. It's something that I do very, very regularly with a lot of my candidates. You know, I think interviewing is definitely a skill set. And, you know, even if you're interviewing for something you're not super excited about, you know, take it seriously because it is good practice. A couple of don'ts that I always like to go over, you know, like I said, don't go in unprepared, don't go in too casual. Make sure that you're keeping the tone of the interview professional, you know, no inappropriate jokes, no swearing, even if, you know, the interviewer and you do have really good rapport. Make sure that you're actively listening. You know, they will, like I said, probably answer a lot of the questions that you've had, like that you came in with in the interview. So make sure that you're noting what they answered and, you know, you have questions ready to go. Don't re-ask things that they've already asked because it sounds like you're not actively listening. Bring a resume, bring a pen and paper, be taking notes. You know, you want to make sure that it seems like you're focused and you want to be paying attention because, you know, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and you want to make sure that you're leaving there with, you know, as much information as you need. Where to apply, you know, as you're looking for jobs, LinkedIn, as I touched on, Career Builder, Monster, Indeed, Google, Craigslist. There are so many job boards out there. We post all of our jobs on all of these. Some people don't think maybe to look on like Google or Craigslist or stuff like that, but they're all great resources. You can also be looking at more specific job boards. You know, I know for my school, we have like Washington and Lee focused job boards that we use to connect with our alums. And so using your network is also a really great way to be doing that. You know, but any exposure to any of those job boards as well, even if you're even if there is some repetition in terms of the roles that you're looking at, casting a wide net, especially right now, I think is the best way to be strategizing your job search. The other great place to apply is with a staffing firm. And so, you know, reaching out to a recruiter can really be a good way to cast a wide net. A lot of companies that are hiring right now, I mean, like I said, we have been getting more jobs in, which has been really exciting. A lot of clients that we've been working with are hiring contractors, people for temporary positions, because they are not as certain what 2021 is going to look like. And so a lot of companies will use staffing firms to bring on temporary employees. Like we have clients that we work with that don't even post their temporary positions. So there's a whole job market out there that you won't be exposed to if you're not like working with a recruiter or two. The other thing is, you know, once we establish a relationship, you know, we are the ones, you know, helping you, advocating for you for these different companies. You know, we can talk through your experience. We can talk through what a great candidate you are and, you know, how professional you are and all of that stuff. It's essentially another way to have someone else kind of on your side and helping with your job search. We also, again, like I said, have a thumb up on the pulse of the market, which is great. You know, we can give you a little bit more information on what types of roles are hiring, what we're anticipating, what our clients have kind of talked to us about, like going into whether it's the holiday season or into 2021. So we can hopefully look into somewhat of a crystal ball and try to figure out what is going to be a good strategy for your job search. The other thing to note, you know, even if a recruiter that you reach out to doesn't have the perfect job for you right now, or if they're not working on a ton of positions, that doesn't mean that they won't 2 weeks from now and they couldn't reach out to you back then. I spend a lot of time working with candidates, reconnecting with people that I'm working with a lot of candidates that I interviewed with pre-COVID, because now I'm getting jobs in that I can talk to them about. So it's a good way to establish like a long-term relationship for, something that's going to continually help you find jobs and, expand that job search. Working with a recruiter, a couple of things I do really like to highlight: honesty, transparency, be honest about what you're open to. I think we touched on flexibility. I think in COVID, it is important to consider things that you might not be open to, but obviously, like, if a commute is too far, if a compensation isn't going to work for you, let your recruiter know how the parameters of your search have changed, so they can be, tailoring your job search to what is actually going to work for you. There's nothing worse than going through 2 rounds of interviews. The client loves you, you really like the client, and then you realize that it's a 2-hour commute each way, and that's not going to be feasible. So, being honest, but also listen, be flexible. I call candidates all the time about positions that maybe we didn't talk about during an interview, but I'm like, okay, this is something that I think they might be interested in. Worst case scenario, you say no, so listen, be open to things, but also, again, like I said, be honest with yourself and with your recruiter about what is actually going to work for you and, what you would be interested in and excited about. Take our advice. Like I said, I love working with candidates and helping tailor their resumes and advocating for them to different clients. I typically will reformat all of my candidates' resumes. So, if you're working with a recruiter and they have recommendations, especially for specific clients, I definitely recommend taking those recommendations, because they have usually an established relationship with those clients. And so they know kind of what those clients will respond to well, or, a specific way to kind of give your resume the leg up in terms of your job search. The other thing that I will, just touch on with COVID, patience. We have been starting to get jobs in again, which is great. But, I have been, consistently touching base with candidates that I've been working with all through COVID. I have not had a lot of things to be talking about them with, but, if you're touching base in a consistent and appropriate way, when those jobs do come in, you'll be the first person to call, rather than, because you already have an established relationship with them. So, it can be a really good way, again, like I said, to get your resume out there for positions that are contract, that are moving more quickly, and, to have someone kind of in your corner advocating for you. I don't know how much time I just took, but if there are questions, I can take them now, or we can wait until the end.
Thanks so much, Brianna. I think you already have one question in the chat.
Okay.
Brianna's going to stay on our call, so please feel free to drop questions for her in the chat. And we're going to transition to our Alumni Performance and Arts Administration panel. So I'm going to kick off with Master Sergeant Wes Ballenger. Hi, Wes.
Hi, Joni. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. I am the bass trombone player with the United States Army Field Band. I grew up in an Air Force family, so we moved kind of back and forth across the country while I was in school. I ended up in Los Angeles, California for high school. I graduated out of Torrance, California, and then I went to Indiana. I had an existing relationship from the college audition preparation camp. I attended that twice with Dee Stewart over a couple summers, and ended up at IU from 01 to 05. I graduated in 05, and timing just worked out really well. And the audition for the Army Field Band bass trombone position was in February of that year. So won the audition during my senior year. The audition was about 5 days after my senior recital. So it's kind of focused on other things and less stressful audition than others that I had taken, and everything kind of worked out. And I've been here for 15 years now. Let's see. I do not live in DC. I've been in the area. We're stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, which is just between DC and Baltimore. We're halfway up the BW Parkway. I live in Ellicott City with my wife and 2 kids. We're in kindergarten and 3rd grade now. I went back to school a few years ago to the University of Maryland University College, and I got an online MBA degree. And let's see, Dee Stewart and Pete Ellison at Indiana, they were my trombone teachers. And I think that's about it for right now. I can talk a little bit more about the job a little bit later, or now if you prefer.
Okay, that's great for now. And then we'll be sure and throw questions into the chat for anybody on the call. Throw questions into the chat at any time, and we'll bring those in. So now we'll introduce Tehvon Fowler-Chapman, representing our arts administration and performance. Hi, Tehvon.
Hi, thank you so much. So I'm Tehvon Fowler-Chapman. I am the new executive director for Washington Concert Opera. I've held that position for about a month and a half now, and I'm slowly transitioning back to New York back to Washington, D.C. from Brooklyn, New York. So right after this call, I'm going to go for about a 6-hour drive back to Virginia. So my family is actually also in the military. My father was in the Air Force for 20 years. So I was actually born in Newport News, Virginia, transitioned to Arizona, where I grew up on Luke Air Force Base, and then I got my undergraduate degree in music education from Arizona State. I spent my graduate career, or my graduate degree, at IU. I spent 1 year studying under Professor John Tafoya and Michael Spiro and the percussion studio at Jacobs. And then I transitioned over to the School of Public and Environmental Affairs, where I pursued a master's degree in arts administration. So I finished that degree in May of 2018. After that, I ended up going to Virginia, where I worked for the Wolf Trap Foundation for the Performing Arts as the company manager for Wolf Trap Opera, a young artist training program for opera singers and directors. And then I just moved in December of 2019 to New York to be Director of Artistic Administration for National Sawdust in Brooklyn. COVID happened, and I was unfortunately laid off from that job, but created this opportunity for me to return back to DC with Washington Concert Opera. So I'm happy to be back in the DC area. I'm currently going to be residing in Virginia, but I'll either be living between DC, Virginia, or Maryland when I actually settle in.
Thank you so much. And we're delighted to have Colin Sorgi with us today from the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. Hi, Colin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Colin Sorgi. I have been in the Baltimore Symphony now for 2 years as a violist. I grew up in Texas and then moved out to Maryland to study at Peabody for my undergrad, and then went to Indiana for 2 years for my grad school. I was with Jamie Laredo in a past life as a violinist, and I moved back out to Baltimore basically at the request of my then girlfriend, who said, well, you don't have anything else to do, so you should just come move to Baltimore. And we are now married, and we have a 2-year-old, but I'm glad to have been employed that whole time. I spent pre-Baltimore Symphony, I spent the majority of my freelance life working in DC and the surrounding area. We live in Baltimore, but many people consider that the DC metro area also. So before the BSO, for 5 years, I was the concertmaster of the National Philharmonic, which is a community or regional orchestra, I guess they would say, with probably the largest budget in the area, and that afforded me a lot of time and experience to kind of explore my passions, one of which was playing the viola, and that's how I ended up as a violist. So that's sort of my journey from there to here.
Thank you so much. And then pinch hitting on our panel today is my colleague and friend and fellow career advisor, Nathan Fischer. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for letting me get a word in here. I am not IU alumni. I went to Eastman, so but I'm still going to share my experience. I came from a military family also. My dad was frequently stationed in the Mid-Atlantic region, and I more or less grew up in Northern Virginia. And that was, I think, the big thing that I want to express here is that DC is not one of these cities that grows up; it grows out. And so you have Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia and Washington DC, and it's a very expansive area that has a lot of artistic activity. There's a lot of nonprofits. There's a lot of organizations that are willing to work with people. And I think as things normalize from COVID, that will become more the case. I graduated from George Mason University, which is in Fairfax, Virginia, with a degree in classical guitar performance. And during my time there, I managed to network in with, playing wedding gigs or playing for functions and parties. Actually got like a management that would put me in touch with gigs through the State Department and through government organizations, in addition to private, organizations. And I think that those kinds of things are probably on hold right now, but will come back. And so I think being in the area and being connected, there's a lot of opportunity. And that was when I was just like an undergrad and was probably horrible, right? So I was still getting hired. The other thing about the DC area is that through the Library of Congress and through the Smithsonian and through another, a lot of these, major cultural centers are internships that are available that you can, especially specifically for music and the arts, that you can, take advantage of, apply for, and those kinds of opportunities will help you network in. And so anyways, there's a lot going on in Washington, DC. I think it's a completely underrated city when it comes to the arts. And anyways, I have a place in my heart for it, and I'm very happy to be here and to just say that. So thank you, Joni.
Thank you, Nathan. I think I'd like to just ask our panelists to, if they'd like to expound on that a little bit. What did you find when you got to the area that were some of the major advantages of being in that region? What are the types of opportunities that you found and capitalized on?
I could start. So I moved to Virginia in 2018, and so I had this whole idea of like what my life would be like when I moved to the DC area. When I got the job at Wolf Trap, and I realized how far away the place that I worked in was from DC, and while it was further away, I kind of realized that even in the Northern Virginia area, I still was able to, take the train quite easily into the capital, which was really great for me in terms of just being in the capital and kind of enjoying the museums and enjoying the culture that existed there. And the other part for it is I work in opera specifically, and I have every time that I've been in DC, the cultural or the community within opera specifically, and I think the same thing can go for just classical music in general, is pretty tight-knit and close. Working at Wolf Trap allowed me to get to know people at the Kennedy Center, with the National Symphony Orchestra, with Washington National Opera, with Vocal Arts DC, with the place that I work in now, and also with various military bands that performed at Wolf Trap. So, the music scene is a lot closer than what I originally thought because the space is so large. So those two things were really great for me being there, and it's also really exciting to go back and experience all of that again.
Great, thank you.
I can also say that expanding on that a little bit, because the area of the metro area is so large, there's a lot going on musically, I think, and artistically, because there's a lot of space and not too much competition. So, if you're comfortable being in your car a lot, which many of us freelancers in the area were, then the opportunity is very ripe, I think. There's a lot going on that's really great.
Thank you. Wes, do you want to tell us a little bit about how the military bands are responding to the changes that are being sort of forced by COVID?
Sure. It's been an interesting 6 months for everyone here, I'm sure. We were actually on tour. The United States Army Field Band, our primary mission is touring and playing free concerts for the public all across the country. And we were on tour when everything started to happen. So we were about 2 weeks in, and we were actually in Indianapolis, getting ready to play a concert up there. And it was about March 13th or so. And that's when all this, the NBA stopped playing, sports stopped, schools started closing campuses. And we were supposed to perform at Chicago Symphony Hall on the next Monday. And all of a sudden, everything got shut down. There was a restriction on all military personnel. So we had to cancel everything, come straight home. And for our band in particular, we transitioned pretty fast because, you know, we were in the mindset of being on a 25-day tour. So we got back after 2 weeks of that in good playing shape from 2 weeks of concerts, and we started live streaming. We have been live streaming over YouTube and Facebook over the last couple of years. We've upped our video capabilities, and we live stream a lot of our live performances. So we took that into our concert band room. We transitioned it into a studio, and we started live streaming COVID compliant concerts and presentations and performances March 19th. And we did daily live streams up until Labor Day. And we are pivoting again, educational outreach initiative. We're calling it the Virtual Music Classroom. And we're adding to our existing line of educational materials, and really targeting teachers and students that are facing unique challenges with virtual distance learning and hybrid learning right now. So that's sort of where we're putting our efforts in right now, and just trying to stay helpful and relevant current times.
Great, thank you. What across the board for our panelists, we have a sense of what the challenges are in the COVID era, and the Jacob School of Music is certainly tap dancing with those challenges and ballroom dancing with those challenges as well. But what innovations are you seeing coming out of this particular time? What are the exciting sort of new things that are arising out of this extraordinary challenge?
Something I've always observed with arts organizations is how we've used technology in the past, in which it's kind of been this vehicle for education and outreach, which is fantastic. And it's the way that we reach out to new audiences. But what COVID has presented us with is an opportunity to learn how to engage with our online audiences in a different way. I'm a firm believer that, the person who likes the stuff that we post online is not always going to purchase a ticket when it comes to seeing a live show. And I have to think how I can provide the best kind of content for them based off of where they are, so they're still a supporter. And I think that is probably one of the best things that's come out of this for a lot of organizations, is that we're really taking that to heart and creating a lot of online content with the idea of the medium that we're creating the content for in mind. And in general, seeing a lot of individual artists go off and create their own things on the internet as well. Larry Brownlee, he has his whole kind of talk show situation, which is fantastic. I was just on another one with Karen Slack. There's a lot of creativity coming out of this for people, and it's not just about them necessarily kind of finding a different way to make money. It's about them trying to still express themselves and create the art that they are so attached to. So it's been pretty uplifting, and it's been very inspiring and empowering for me when it comes to helping kind of guiding Washington Concert Opera through the exact same challenges and opportunities.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat from Paula. Paula, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, and Brianna, you might want to weigh in on this question as well.
Oh, my question, I guess I can just read it. So I'm interested in attending graduate school at American University. So I was just wondering, what are some cities that you'd recommend in terms of cost of living, commute? Everyone's mentioning how they live in different parts of the DC metro area. So I'm wondering if there's like a specific few locations that would be good for the commute, the cost of living, and also still allow me to be connected to the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a fair number of candidates, either who are recent graduates from American or, who are in grad school or undergrad at American University. And, DC is an expensive city, and, living as a student is definitely presents its own set of challenges. I work with a lot of candidates. I think one thing that is really great about the DC area is the metro. I think, if you're going to school at American, like that's up on the red line. And so any place that's kind of connected red line, like it means that you're not going to have to transfer or anything, and you can just hop on the train and kind of be where you want to like get to campus. Or, if you're working downtown, you can kind of do that. So I would recommend looking at places along like certain metro stops that you're going to be at. I'd say in terms of affordability, a lot of candidates that I work with do live in the Arlington area. That is probably going to be a little bit less accessible in terms of like getting to American, but I do have candidates that do it. There are also, I forget what they are off the top of my head, there are also metro stops up a little bit more north of American University that go into Maryland, that I have a lot of candidates that live up in that area as well. They're a little bit less, like downtown DC is super expensive. But things that are a little bit more north that are not in like the city center, I would recommend as being a little bit more doable. The other thing that I will say is I have found a lot of candidates find a lot of success with living in like group houses over apartments. Apartments in DC are super expensive. There are a ton of people that live in row homes that have, I don't want to say random roommates, but that have done networking in DC, and they live in a house with, like I live in a house with 4 girls because it's a lot more affordable than living in a studio. And so that's something else that I would recommend doing, is finding, whether it's through the IU chat or Facebook page, or there's a lot of DC housing pages as well, and you can find and connect with roommates there. And I think that's a really good way to be managing cost of living here in DC. It was a long-winded answer, so.
That's great, Brianna, thank you. We have a question that came in from our Facebook Live feed. With the DC area being so large and with so many people in military bands or orchestras, how have you worked to network and build relationships? Are you at a disadvantage by not being from the DC area originally or going to a DC area university? Who wants to take that one?
I would start.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nathan.
My quick answer was no, you're not. I mean, you just get in and you have to network, and you have to hustle. And I think that, those opportunities, you'll build them out. And I'll let you take it, Tehvon.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we were talking about LinkedIn earlier, and this is one of those times where it gets 100% your friend well before you arrive in an area. I connect with, even when I was living in DC, I was connecting with people who lived in New York and Ohio and anywhere when I knew that I was looking for that next job. And so, I would say the same thing. No, it's not necessarily an issue. I think it takes the exact same amount of time as if, or maybe a little bit more time, as if you were kind of living there and going to school there already. But it's really just about knowing who to connect with and finding the right people to kind of let them know what you are looking for and how they can actually help you. And not being afraid of reaching out for that help. I've sent a lot of essentially cold calls or like cold messages to people over LinkedIn and over Facebook. and in whatever format that I could possibly find them. And really the worst thing that happens is that they don't respond or that they say no. But there's so much opportunity for them to say yes that I think it's always worth it just to reach out and see where it goes.
Anything to add from either of our other panelists?
Just to jump in quickly, this is a little bit less on the art side, but I think Kristen touched on it earlier. There are in DC, it's definitely a city that is such a melting pot and is such a place of networking. I definitely don't see, like, I work with candidates from all over the country, and I have never had an issue with someone not being from DC. I think just being comfortable, to echo off what Tehvon said, being comfortable reaching out, being comfortable, going on coffee dates or sending that LinkedIn message or hopping on an informational interview. I find that people are incredibly receptive to it. And, I'll have clients that, maybe they've interviewed one of our candidates prior, and 6 months later, they'll have a job come in that's totally different. And they'll be like, hey, I thought of so-and-so. And so it's definitely, I think, in DC, very much a city of networking.
And I will add that from an orchestral standpoint, there are an incredible amount of gig orchestras and regional orchestras in the area. National Philharmonic for one, Annapolis Symphony, Alexandria Symphony. It would take me forever to list them all, but do not hesitate for 1 second to send an email to the personnel managers of those orchestras. You can always find them on the website of whatever orchestra. The AFM Union also hosts a showcase in Washington, D.C. I think it's twice a year, and generally the contractors of all of these great paying DC gigs come in the fall showcase, and you play 5 minutes of orchestral excerpts or solo works or whatever, and then that puts you on a list of hireable people in the area. I think that has been a really great resource for a lot of new incoming people in the DC area, and I would definitely recommend that.
That's great. Thank you.
Could I say one other real quick thing, which is, don't forget about all the churches and then the Washington Cathedral and all the choirs and all of the organizations involved. The religious organizations, and they are huge supporters of music and patrons of music. So make sure that you reach out to choir directors or musical directors with those institutions. Find out what their audition requirements are, audition dates, create a spreadsheet of those dates, and get prepared. And when things normalize and the choirs are meeting again, that is definitely a possibility. So
a quick question I have for everybody is just teaching opportunities. If anybody has experience in being able to sort of portfolio career, supporting yourself as you go through as an artist, what other teaching experiences have you had as you've developed your identity in the region?
I can sort of talk about that. My wife is the teacher of the family, and she's been dedicating her, professional life to the educational side of things. When I was freelancing, I did more teaching. There are always opportunities for working in the education side of things. In Baltimore, I know it's not DC, and I'm very sorry. In Baltimore, we have the OrCids program run through the BSO, and they employ a lot of young, new teachers in the area to work with underprivileged areas within the Baltimore public school scene, providing instruments and stuff like that. They do a lot of music education. In DC, I'm less familiar with that, but there are always organizations that run private teaching. I think in some ways establishing yourself as a private teacher on your own is a little bit more difficult. My wife teaches at the Peabody Preparatory full time, and so she gets a lot of her students that way. Again, I think if you're interested in teaching and education, the only thing that I would ever recommend is to just send your resume around to these educational organizations and just say, I'm interested in teaching. Do you have any openings? Again, using LinkedIn, I think, is a resource that seems to be very helpful in this way. I think the main takeaway from this is probably just don't be ashamed to put yourself out there, and it can't possibly hurt. So there's a lot of opportunity, just got to look for it a little bit.
And I'll add two things to that, because before I went full-time into arts administration, I taught marching band for several years. When I first moved to Reston, Virginia, I thought about teaching at the high school that was down the street from me. Another high school that was further down had no clue of either of the band directors, and it's just reiterating the idea of not being afraid to reach out and accepting no as a possible answer or no response as a possible answer. And to Colin's point, he had mentioned it was, I don't remember the name of the organization, it's Kids with the VSO, right? Here is a networking opportunity because the person who runs that group is a colleague of mine with the Sphinx organization. So this is the first example of a networking opportunity, like 2 degrees of separation.
I would also just add that going back to that, the professional organizations in DC, for example, the Suzuki Association of America is really strong in the DC area. And if you enjoy teaching kids, and that's something that you could see yourself doing, you could use that. You could join the organization. You could get that kind of certification, and they would help network you in on a certain level. And then you also have community schools like the Levine School in Maryland, and there's loads of community schools and corner store music shops that offer lessons that you could build yourself into as you're getting settled. So just thought I'd throw that out.
Well, as we're rolling up on the hour, I just wanted to take an opportunity to ask our panelists if there's any final thoughts you'd like to offer, or a tip or pointer that worked for you in your early career, or whatever you would like to say to us as we're rolling up on the hour.
I'll jump in, Joni. One thing, it's great being here and thinking about Indiana again. After 10 years, it's been 5 years now, but at the 10-year anniversary, a bunch of us that were trombone players at IU at the same time got together. We went back and did a master class together, kind of a 10-year anniversary. Some of us were went on to be professional musicians. Some had gone on to teach music. Some don't touch the trombone anymore, but have very successful careers in other areas. So I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of opportunities out there. What you learn in music school, there's so many skills that translate into different areas. So don't be afraid to explore different areas, do different things. Right now, the last 6 months, I've been much more of a producer than a trombone player. We have folks learning how to use video cameras, video editing, and all sorts of different skills. So, just be open to new experiences, new jobs, and new ways of doing things. So that's really all I had. Appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you.
So I would say one of the biggest things, besides, being resourceful and being flexible, especially right now, is really, you all go to IU. Jacobs School is probably the biggest school of music that I've ever seen in my life. There are a lot of people from your school who are out there. Both of the people who came before me in my role are IU students. The person who vouched for me, or who was a reference for me in going to Wolf Trap, was also a former IU student. And even when working in Brooklyn and asking for a very large sum of money for my organization, my first connection with that person was the fact that we both went to the Jacobs School of Music. And I think it's really, it's really important to utilize the, the alumni network in whatever medium that you have it. But there is a lot of rapport within students who all have come from the same place, who have all gone through the same things to get to where they are. And we are more than happy to kind of help you move along within your career in the same ways that we have. And if you're interested in more arts administration things, and I couldn't cover anything for you here, please feel free to shoot me an email or send me a message on Facebook, and I will set up some time to talk to you later.
Great, thank you. Colin, anything to say from your
Sure.
IU days and tips?
Wes and Tehvon said it all. I think that, again, I'll just say, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to do a whole bunch of stuff. When I first started out, I was playing the violin, and I was also contracting, and I was managing an orchestra, and I was doing orchids, and I ended up doing arts marketing for a little while before I found my path and my passion. There are a lot of avenues with which you can use your talents. As a kind of advertisement for the DC area, the proximity to so much musical and artistic opportunity is I-95, and DC connects with Baltimore, it connects with Philadelphia, and you are just hours away from a lot of opportunities. So I can't I can't recommend it more highly to be in this area. It has really been wonderful for our careers, and a lot of friends that I know are very thankful for the opportunity in the area.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of our panelists, and I want to thank everyone for logging on today and joining us on Facebook Live for this great discussion. A reminder that on the JSOM Entrepreneurship and Career Development YouTube channel, you can see an archive of our conversations covering New York City and Chicago. And coming up on August 16th, we're virtually visiting Los Angeles. And on November 6th, we'll be in Nashville, Tennessee. So this Washington, D.C. conversation has been wonderful, and I just want to thank you all so much, and thank you to our alumni for joining us today. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.